You're not recording now, so I just want to apologize for the recording not being
Hereby I call this open portion of the council meeting held Monday, June 26, 2017 to order. I'd like to please ask everyone to rise for a moment of silence. Please be seated. I'd like to start off by apologizing that we were late due to our closed session, but then after that, due to the power outage, the rebooting of the recording had to be done, and then we needed a password, so it's now recording. We wanted to make sure that we carried on the continuity of our YouTube posted council meetings. So I apologize for delaying the start of the meeting. The next item is disclosure of pecuniary interest and nature thereof. Councillor Guido.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Pecuniary interest was 10.1.4, and those are the PCNA council PCNA meeting minutes, as well as 50-17, the bylaw for the Antiflick development.
Okay, that's been noted. Any other pecuniary interest? Right, seeing none. Announcements from council and then from staff. Councillor Somerville.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. I have a couple of announcements. First of all, the Greenbank Lions at Greenbank had their award night last Wednesday evening, and the grade 5 and 6, they won the award for the Ambassadors of the Year, where they have gone out and done a lot of volunteering and collecting items for third worlds, and they have sent them to Guatemala and to First Nations, and so they got awarded. The other one was Dot Hooker Award for the individual volunteer of the year, and he went to Maya, who I don't know her last name, sorry. And we also got an award given to the Lion of the Year, and that is Grant Larry Doble. For all the grants he does. So they make, because they don't give it to lions, but they gave it to Grant Doble. It was quite cute. And then Saturday evening, this past Saturday evening, Greenbank held their 150th celebration with 300 to 350 in attendance. They started with a tractor parade, and then they had about 50 children who had decorated their bicycles, and they had a parade as well, and then there was lots of food and free hot dogs and dessert, and then there was local talent that came in afterwards, and it was just a really, really great evening. Community involvement, it was so nice to see such a good community involvement with the Greenbank community. And then Seagrave held their historical walk yesterday with Paul Arculus and Larry Doble, giving a good talk to each person, or to our group. We had about 50 people in that group, and about the history of Seagrave and how it was brought to fruition. And our bridge was built in 1929, I think, that little bridge there. So that's quite a little piece of history, so we mustn't take that little bridge away. That's my little tour. Thank you.
Another announcements from council. Councillor Catt.
Thank you, Mayor. We're really happy that we're going forward after 4 years of getting natural gas on the island, and there's actually going to be a meeting on July the 26th at the Island Hall. Thank you.
Just to clarify that, there's a application that's going in that's not a defense. I want to make sure it's clear that that application isn't successful. It doesn't mean that it's going in anyways. It's contingent on the application.
It's been a long time coming, and this is actually the environmental assessment that's going to be on the 26th. But they're all steps forward. Although they be small, they're steps forward.
Long time coming. Councillor Back.
Thank you, through the mayor. I forgot to mention this Friday, June 30th, Saturday, July 4th, oh my goodness, July 1st, and Sunday, July 2nd, the first ever Scugog Summer Jam will be happening at the fairgrounds, and we hope everyone gets their tickets and comes over, especially on the Saturday night after the fireworks. The headliner, Aaron Prachette, will start at 10:30. So there's enough time for people after they have the fireworks in Palmer Park to come on over and end the evening in style.
Okay, any other announcements from council? Councillor Drew?
Thank you. Just announcing the annual festivities for Canada Day in Palmer Park. It's a 2-day festival this year. Back-to-back entertainment all day long on Saturday after the opening ceremonies. The Vets for Vets parade starts at 10:30, going all the way down Queen Street. It's going to be bigger and better this year. Lots of vets, but lots of other things too. We're celebrating our history, our heritage, our automotive history, our sports history, all this in one parade. And then the back-to-back entertainment, lots of children's entertainment, lots of free stuff, lots of free food. On Sunday, free pancake breakfast. The Rotary is doing all the work and would be happy to accept donations for their work, and more entertainment, free entertainment after that. So, thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Lots of things happening in Canada Day in Scugog. Councillor, any other councillor before coming back to Councillor Kett for announcements? Councillor Kett?
Just to remind everybody that the Scugog Jam will be covered in case of rain. It'll hold 3,500 people. We won't have free food and we won't have free alcohol, but we will be covered.
Okay, and just adding that last week I also attended the Port Perry Place, which was formerly the Port Perry Nursing Home. I was invited there to help celebrate Senior Month. June is Senior Month, and had a great time with the residents of Port Perry Place, going around the different tables and talking about things that are happening in the community, as well as making sure they feel like valued citizens in the community. So it was very rewarding going through there. Now we have announcements from staff. Mr. Allure?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm pleased to inform you that Chief Mark Burney was re-elected as Vice President of the Ontario Association of Fire Chiefs at their 65th annual general meeting in May. This will be Mark's second term as Vice President, and prior to that he was a board member for 3 years. Congratulations, Mark.
Congratulations. Any other announcements from staff? All right, that brings this meeting to a close. No, I'm just kidding. We're now up with presentations, and the first presentation we have is from Trina McDonald and Heather Allison from BDO Canada for presentation of the 2016 Scugog financial statements. Welcome. Just a reminder, push the buttons flush. You don't have to speak too close to the mic, but close enough so that it'll portray through the speakers.
Okay. Good evening, everybody. Thank you for having us here today. So we're going to go through your financial statements. So financial audits are performed to ascertain the validity and the reliability of the information contained within them. As your independent auditor, BDO has been engaged to render an opinion on whether your financial statements are presented fairly in all material respects. Our opinion is based on the work performed throughout the course of our audit. Management's responsibility through the audit is to preparation and fair presentation of the financial statements in accordance with Canadian Public Sector Accounting Standards, and the internal control necessary in order to allow the preparation of the financial statements. Our responsibility as auditors is to conduct the audit in accordance with Canadian generally accepted auditing standards. To plan the audit, to obtain reasonable assurance that the financial statements are free from material misstatements. Here we evaluate and gain an understanding of the internal control systems that are in place. We perform procedures to obtain audit evidence to support the completeness, existence, accuracy, and valuation of the amounts and the disclosures within your financial statements. These procedures include external confirmations, testing of transactions, and supporting documentation, as well as analytical procedures. We evaluate the appropriateness of your accounting policy, as well as the reasonableness of management's estimates. At the conclusion of the audit, we then issue our opinion. This year, our audit opinion is that the consolidated financial statements present fairly in all material respects the financial position of the corporation of the Township of Scugog. So the rest of the presentation is going to go through the financial statements and give you highlights of your statements. So your consolidated statement of financial position, your financial assets consist of cash, cash equivalents, taxes receivables, accounts receivables, and inventory for resale. At year end, your financial assets were $23,549,000. This is a 9% increase year over year. Your cash increased approximately $3 million, and I'll walk you through the changes of the cash when I get to the cash flow statement. Accounts receivables decreased $200,000 due to an allowance for doubtful accounts for the green bank fees, a decrease in the government funding receivable of $297,000, and however there was then an increase in trades receivable of $526,000, which was due to increased permits throughout the year. Taxes receivable decreased $1 million, and this was mainly due to collection of older accounts. You had more staff this year, and so you were working on cleaning up old accounts. Moving down, so your net financial assets. So your liabilities throughout the year have increased approximately $1.2 million, and this is primarily due to the obligatory fund reserves. There was an increase of $539,000, and this is the deferral of your federal gas tax funding for the year. And the other increase is due to security deposits of $553,000. Overall, the net financial assets of the townships are $15.1 million, which is an increase of $750,000 from prior year. Your non-financial assets are normally used to deliver services and are primarily composed of your tangible capital assets. Your capital outlays for 2016 amounted to $2.2 million, and the main outlays were for road resurfacing and treatments, which included Edgerton Road, Chandler Drive, and Aldred Drive. There's additional tractors and a new ice resurfacer, as well as a new roof on the community center. So this graph is really just showing the composition of your revenue and expenses. And as you can see, taxation and user charges really make up 3/4 of your revenues that are coming into the township every year. These are consistent year over year. The amounts, like they fluctuate 1 or 2% a year. Expenses, again, they're very consistent year over year. And your salaries and benefits and the materials used are basically, again, 3/4 of the expenses outlaid throughout the year. So during the year, you had $18.8 million of revenue. This is an increase of $1 million year over year. So the reasons for the increase is contributed tangible capital assets of $455,000, and this was the Easy Street assumption that you had in 2016. There's increase of user charges of $702,000 due to additional Green Bank Airways for sampling and tipping, as well as a one-time payout for the insurance premiums from the Durham Regional Insurance Pool. It was offset by a decrease of your federal grant revenue of $437,000, and this is because you deferred funding this year for future capital projects. Expenses at the end of the year were $20,142,000. This is an increase of $131,000 over the prior year, and the main reasons for this is general government expenses increase due to increase in bad debt expense related to the Green Bank issue, and consulting costs of $110,000 to cover periods when you were without staff in a CAO in 2016. This was offset by the decrease in the ISP project costs due to the termination of that project. Transportation expenses decreased $295,000, and that's because there's no gravel resurfacing in 2016. However, then it was increased by increased salting and sanding throughout the year, and repairs and maintenance to graders. So this is a 5-year summary. This chart is of your expenses by department, and you can see that they are relatively similar year over year. There's not much variation in your planned expenditures over the years. And here are just some different facts, just giving you visuals instead of, so here we're showing your overall revenue and expenditures as well as your annual deficit for the current year. So the purple is your revenues, green are the expenditures, and when the green's higher, you're seeing deficit throughout the year. So you've had fluctuations throughout the year. Basically, revenue fluctuates based on your user fees and different assumptions throughout the year. So they don't always occur regularly, and they're hard to plan for. Expenses have continued to increase over the past 5 years. They started at $17 million and have climbed to $20 million as you continue to maintain and improve your township. And your surpluses have fluctuated between a deficit of $2 million to a surplus of $1.8 million. A deficit doesn't necessarily mean a decrease in available funds, and I'm going to discuss that in the next page. So quite often your deficits are occurring because you don't budget for amortization. So what we've done here is we've taken your annual surplus and we've added back the amortization, which is a non-cash item. So you can see where you would be if you didn't have the amortization in your financial statements. The red bar itself is actually your TCA additions. So what this is showing is that you've got a surplus here, however your additions are not maintaining your, are not high enough to maintain the TCA that you've already own. So they're declining with that, but you do have the cash available, is what that's showing. So at the end of 2016, you ended the year with a $1.2 million deficit, which is a decrease, as last year your deficit was $2.1 million. So it was an improvement. Okay. And so here again, so this is showing your net financial assets. So these are, so that's on a steady incline, which is good. They've been steadily increasing. Your debenture debt is the green line there, and it's steadily going down as you make your regular payments. And then the blue line again, that's showing your annual surplus or your deficit for that. The last page I'm going to speak about in your financial statement is your statement of cash flows. And so this is showing where your cashes came from throughout the year and how it was used. So overall, your cash position, as I said, increased $3.1 million. Your cash flow statement starts with your operating surplus or deficit, and then we add back the non-cash items, which brings you to a $2.2 million of available funding or cash. And then with your changes of your current accounts of $2.3 million, that brings your available cash to $4.5 million in the year. Throughout the year, you had capital purchases and disposals of a net of $1.4 million, and so we take that off the $4.5 million, and that leaves you with $3.1 million of increase in cash in the year end. And then the rest of the financial statements are your notes, and they are all adding detail and information to the main numbers on your financial statements. Any questions?
Thank you very much for that report. questions from council? Councillor Kett first.
Thank you, Mayor. I got a few questions. On one of your first slides, you had the pie chart on where our expenses went. So I wondered, is there any measurement for percentage compared to other municipalities?
I would say on whole, you're very similar in your salaries and your materials. That is a very common breakdown of those two. The other ones, they fluctuate as everybody has different needs within their municipalities. But as for salaries and benefits, it's always number one on any municipality, and because it is a service-based industry, and then typically materials is the next one. So.
Okay. Now, some of our provincial money, you said, was deferred to future projects?
Right. So it's the federal gas tax is what it is. And so that those monies you receive have restrictions on them. So they can only be used for roads and transportation items like that. So those projects have not been completed yet. So the money is deferred. And then when those projects are completed, it is then brought into revenue.
So is it not wise to use it when you can get it in case somebody else gets voted in?
No, you have the money, it's received. Like, so you've received that money in cash.
Oh, we have? Okay.
Yeah, yep.
Yeah,
It's just that you haven't expended the projects yet. So.
Okay, and the ISP project you said is not continuing. Do we know that?
I think we were looking at it in comparison to prior years. So where there was expenses last year for what was planned for before that didn't happen, that's what we meant.
Okay,
Not the...
Is that the Municipal Service Corporation?
I believe there's a reference to the communicate freely capitalization of expenditures for that. When that's not happening, then it's not going to be on the financials for that.
Yeah, right.
Okay, and one quick question. On the sheets that we got, I don't know if we can't disclose it or whatever, but usually it has the BIA down there and it's missing right now. So I'm just wondering, do we never get presented the BIA audit?
The BIA audit is not complete at this time, so it's with the board of the BIA, and we're making arrangements to meet and go through with them. And so once they've had the chance to approve the statements, then they can bring that to council.
It would be presented at that time?
Yep, because right now their draft, they haven't had that time to
yeah,
back
I
and forth.
understand.
Yep.
I understand. There's some issues there. So I guess the other thing is, normally when you present us with the audited statements, you present all the notices. Does that get presented to the public as well?
It's all the notices. I'm not sure what you mean.
Notice on the front of the management notices on the front. Do they usually get presented with the audited statements?
Is in the final letter to the audit committee? Is that what you're referring to, or
you mean the audit report?
or like all these?
No, that's the content you mean? No, the notice on the front. When there's a notice that says, be careful of this.
The independent auditor's report? Is that what you're referring to?
Yeah.
That would be attached to every financial statement. So it would be attached to these consolidated statements, as well as the individual financial statements for the BIA would include that. It's a standard wording.
And it would be presented, that's all.
The independent auditors, this is what you're referring to? Yes.
I'm not sure what it's called, that's why I'm asking.
Can you show me? Like, do you have it?
No, I could refer you to 2010. But,
okay.
I mean, I'm just wondering if all the notices where it says, we found this, does that get published or not?
So the management letter is issued to management. If they choose to bring it to a session, that is their choice. That is what's going forward. We issue a final letter to the audit committee, or the council, which gives you the highlights of the audit. It gives you our independence, risk areas, materiality, and it goes through that. is what we issue when the audit is complete.
Okay, I'm confused because in the municipal act, you're supposed to present us with the audited statements, all notices, and that. So I'm just wondering if it usually gets done or not.
I provide them to management.
Okay, that's
Yep.
all, that's good. That's all. I don't want to drag this on. That's good. Thank you.
Okay.
Great, thank you. So, next question for BDO, Trina, or, just to, Councillor Drew?
Thank you. When you come out with your management letter, is it typical for you to have some suggestions of how things could be improved?
That's exactly what the management letter is for. The management letter is, say, here are some areas that could be improved, but they are not big enough that they're causing us to change our audit opinion or issue it.
So if something was serious, what would you do?
If it's serious, then it goes into the letter to council.
Thank you.
Okay, and this year's audited, our consolidated statements, which are draft, subject to any revisions that we have here. There's a quick question here on page, I think slide deck 12, or page 12 on your slide deck. It just referenced the add-back depreciation, et cetera. So I just wanted to clarify that based on adding back the surplus and amortization, you said that it's not meeting, there's always a decline because we're not reinvesting as much as the depreciation is there.
Right.
Right? But from this graph, I read it as there is a lessening gap of that we are investing more and more of that gap, so it's lessening.
It is lessening, yes, yeah. So you can see over the years, originally, people were very averse to recognizing the amortization and the purpose to it, so it has been an improving
Okay, no, I just wanted to see, it's hard without having the explanation of it, of the direction of reinvesting back in capital into expenditure. When you read the financial statements, it's different than a regular private corporation.
Right.
You have to take into consideration that the funds coming in and then reinvesting it back into the capital and bringing your asset base back up.
Yeah,
So,
and your capital management plan is there to guide you and help you ensure that you're meeting those targets.
Okay, great. Any other final questions for, seeing none? Thank you very much for your report. Just now, at this time, is moved by Councillor Drew that the presentation by Trina McDonald, Heather Allison, BDO Canada LLP presentation of 2016 financial statements be received, and that the staff financial statements presented by BDO Canada LLP for the year ended December 31st, 2016 be approved. I need a seconder for that. Councillor Kett. All those in favor? Carried. Thank you very much for your presentation. Next up, we have ward boundary review, item 8.2, Eric Carvinen and Dr. Robert Williams. Thank you for your patience in the delay that we have, but just make sure your buttons are pressed and you can move like you've done the goosenecks there. So, all yours.
Great, thank you. Good evening, Mr. Mayor, members of council. I'm Eric Carvinen with Watson and Associates, joined by my colleague, Dr. Robert Williams. We're here to present the final options and recommendations from the Township of Scugog Ward Boundary Review Study. So our consultant team was retained by the Township back at the beginning of this year to conduct a ward boundary review. The review explores a number of key questions. One, does the present ward structure provide for effective representation? And two, would an alternative system provide for better representation than what you currently have? Key study objectives included developing a clear understanding of the present ward system in place, evaluating its strengths and weaknesses of the present ward structure on the basis of the identified guiding principles that were adopted for the study, which Bob will speak to in a few minutes.
identify plausible modifications to the present ward structure, conduct a consultation process to determine community support for the review and its outcome, and to deliver a report with findings and recommended alternative ward boundary options for your consideration. So this review has been a multi-phase assignment. It's included research and data compilation, interviews with members of council and the mayor, population and growth forecasting and data modeling through 2026, development of the preliminary ward options, public consultation on those preliminary alternatives, and the preparation of the study report, which has now been submitted. So the Township of Scugog came to be in 1974 through the amalgamation of the townships of Reach, Cartwright, and Scugog Island, and the village of Port Perry. So initially, council was comprised of a mayor, one regional councillor, and one area councillor, all three of whom were elected at large. In addition, there were 4 local area councillors elected in wards which were based on the pre-amalgamated municipalities. In 1993, the area councillor position was eliminated, and a 5th ward, which is based in Port Perry, was added. And that is the current structure of municipal representation in Scugog, and the map in front of you also presents the existing ward structures that are currently in place. So since that time in 1993, the existing ward boundary structure has not been reviewed, but also recognizing the reviews are not mandatory in Ontario. Since 1993, the township's population has grown almost by 20% during that time, so clearly there's been population growth and shifts over that period. The township's population is expected to grow from about just under 24,000 in 2016 to a little over 26,000 by 2026, an increase of about 10%. And that population estimate includes both permanent population as well as seasonal. There's currently inequalities in the population balance, which is expected to worsen over the next decade. The table in front of you shows the population balance by ward, both in 2016 and 2026, and you can see from this data that there are going to continue to be population imbalances over the next 10 years, with many wards having imbalances that are expected to worsen with time, and Bob will speak to this in more detail.
Now, the next slide reminds you that there are 2 parts of the Municipal Act that are pertinent in this particular review. Section 217 contains 2 elements. It authorizes council to establish the number of councillors, leaving aside your regional councillor, and then to determine whether those councillors, as in the phrase of in the language of the Act, shall be elected by general vote or wards, or by any combination of general vote and wards. So the 2 critical questions are, how big should the council be, and would you continue to use wards or not? Section 222 picks up on that last part and basically suggests that if the municipality is to elect its council through wards, the council is authorized to divide or re-divide the municipality into wards, or to dissolve the existing wards. So the 2 points interrelate, but the key part is that council decides how large its number will be, whether to keep wards, and then if you're going to have wards, what the boundaries look like, and that's really what we're here to address. I re-emphasize the point that electoral reviews are not mandatory in Ontario at the municipal level. The point to remember there, of course, is that such electoral reviews do take place federally and provincially in Canada. The analogous development, or the analogous distribution of seats in the federal and provincial parliaments, the constituencies, those boundaries are reviewed after every census. So every 10 years, we step back and look at the distribution of seats in relation to the population of the country and the province to determine whether there is an effective balance between the representative districts and the population. And as we pointed out a couple of times in Scugog, that has not happened since 1983. 25 years since you stepped back to look at whether these boundaries still match the distribution of the population. Because the reviews are not mandatory, we have no provincial guidelines in terms of legislative arrangements or even regulatory framework for those reviews. But a review to be legitimate and to be effective needs to have some kind of measurements, and we have worked with a set of guiding principles that were part of the original arrangement that was made with us to conduct this review, that were made available to the council and to the community through a background report. And I just want to walk quickly through the 5 principles that are consistent with principles used in other municipalities in Ontario and in municipal case law as developed by the municipal board and other bodies. So the first guiding principle is representation by population. And the language that's there on the slide is the actual language in the terms of reference that we've been following. To the extent possible, every ward councillor will generally represent the same number of constituents with some variation acceptable to take into account residential density and the patterns of settlement in the township. And so population balance or parity is at the top of that list. The acceptable range of population variance will not exceed 25% unless it can be justified as a way to meet one of the other criteria. So again, variation is there, and 25% is pretty generous, but it's a way to at least recognize the variations of settlement. And that non-resident electors will be considered in the determination of population in the wards, and Eric has already referred to the fact that seasonal residents are included in the calculations of the population of the township and of the wards that we're looking at. If representation by population is intended to bring the wards closer to parity in 2017, the second principle is encouraging us to look to the future, that wards will be designed so as to maintain equitable representation over a 3-election cycle. So we start with 2018, we try to see how that can be accommodated through 2022 and 2026. So in other words, we make the change now, but allow for some possibility, not more than a possibility, the probability that population will change over that time, but the wards should stay within balance if at all possible. And the second bullet is reminding us that the population projections will be based on adopted municipal-wide residential growth forecasts and other planning data compiled in 2017. To put it another way, we don't just make up those numbers, we draw them from established sources that allow us to look at population forecasts. Third principle, and one that will prove to be very important in this review, the representation of communities of interest. Wards are not just arithmetic divisions of the community. They are the municipality. They are about trying to group together citizens and residents in a way that forms what is described in here as a plausible grouping of communities and established settlements. And that the wards will therefore, as we put it in the report, we will draw lines around communities of interest, not through them. We will group together communities that make some sense in terms of the distribution of the communities and neighborhoods across Scugog. And wards will, to the extent possible, have regard for the rural nature of the township. So we look at wards in such a way that the rural areas are not divided unnaturally or in a way that is going to penalize the rural part of the township.
I'm sorry to interrupt. I just wanted to get a gauge for how long the presentation was, because we have a very wholesome report here, and I don't want to rehash
I
it
can go
all.
as fast as you want, okay, let's move ahead.
Because I want to make sure we get down to
The questions, okay.
on some
Well, and I'm mainly reviewing this for those who were not at the public meeting or maybe looking at the streaming, but if the text is there, let's just move quickly then. So geographical and topographical features are the fourth principle. We look for boundaries that rely on what we might call visible features. The fifth one, effective representation, again, the text of the guiding principles say the previous four principles are all subject to the overarching principle of effective representation as enunciated by the Supreme Court of Canada in the Carter decision. To put that in simple terms, what the goal of this system is a pattern of representation where citizens have the right to be heard and for councillors to be in a position to represent those people as fairly as possible and in a way that would allow for the equitable treatment of all residents in the making of decisions around this horseshoe. And sometimes, as we will see, we have to make a trade-off between some of the principles to get toward effective representation. Okay, starting point then too will be to say if you've got principles to determine what a good ward system looks like, you obviously start by looking at your current system. Is it a good system under the principles? So, for representation by population, what we call an optimal ward or an average size ward would suggest that 4780 is the ideal, but in fact only 2 of your 4 wards are close to that. 2 of the 5 wards are close to that, and 1 is well below the variation range and another is near the top. When we look at trends into the future, the pattern is much the same. Only 2 are within 5% of the ideal size. 1 is well below the range, and 1 is just at the top end of it. Communities of interest work generally well in the rural areas. They are based and have always been based on the pre-amalgamation municipalities, which in passing paid no attention really to population. It was about those communities. And the wrinkle for us in here is that if community of interest is important, you have 2 wards in Port Perry that actually divide that community in a location that we believe is contrary to this principle. The topographical features, the downtown Port Perry lane, as I mentioned before, is in some ways an artificial lane. And when we look very closely at the boundaries that are there on the map, many of them are really only lanes on paper. They are not following physical features, which is what that principle asks us to do. So when we look at the access to elected representatives, it is imbalanced between area and population. Ward councillors speak in governmental deliberations on behalf of different numbers of residents, quite a varied number, and in that sense, effective representation is not as successful as we would like to see. So, our starting point is you have a system with some weaknesses, some shortcomings. Let's see what else we can do, and we tried to use those principles to develop 4 what we call preliminary options, and we will run through them very quickly because in the end we decided that none of them would be exactly what you needed to achieve those principles. Option A then, B, C, and D, with different approaches to how we capture communities of interest and try to achieve population balance. And you'll notice, again, we won't go back through them, but many of these, some of these rather, do a better job balancing off population than the current system. None of them are perfect, but they showed some ways in which the system of representation could be enhanced.
Okay. So once we had developed the preliminary options, we went into the public through a public consultation process, and we asked the public a series of questions, including asking them in their judgment on the current strengths and weaknesses of the existing ward boundary structure. we asked for feedback on which guiding principle should be given the highest priority in designing an alternative ward model. And third, which of the preliminary options that Bob just spoke to do you like or dislike, and the reasons why? So from respondents, we heard, with respect to the guiding principles, the highest priority should be placed on representation of communities of interest, followed by geographical and topographical features, and also effective representation. We heard strong interest in maintaining the existing ward structure. Of the preliminary options, preliminary option D received some support, but there was relatively limited support for the other three preliminary options. The table on the screen here provides a summary of the evaluation of the preliminary options and the present ward structure when tested against the 5 guiding principles which Bob spoke to earlier. As you can see, option D and C, option C does relatively well in regards to meeting the guiding principles. The other options rate a little bit lower, and the present ward structure has some shortcomings which Bob spoke to.
So basically, from the feedback and from further refinement, work that we did on these options, we decided that we would consolidate some of that information and bring back 2 options. One is what we would call a minor reconfiguration of the existing ward structure. That's not a direction we would normally take, to basically say, well, we've got a system with some weaknesses, but we'll leave it in place anyway. There's a strong sense, as Eric suggested, from the feedback we got, that people were relatively happy with that arrangement. There is a fairly important issue that we felt we could address without having to adjust very many other features of the system, and we'll see that in a moment. So final option 1 is what we might call a minimal change. Final option 2, we took some of the features of option C, which has just been mentioned, was reasonably well received, and worked with that to come up with a slightly different approach. Nothing as dramatic as we saw in some of the preliminary options, but one that moved us, I think, in a direction we felt was suitable. So one of the factors I do need to speak to very quickly, of course, is that in that chart, you'll notice that in every option, representation by population gets a great big no. Again, normally that's the top priority. The difficulty we find, given the nature of this particular municipality, its topography, its history, other things, it meant it was very difficult to actually get to a population balance without a major violation, if you will, of some of the other principles. And the key factor there, of course, is the population in Ward 3. And my point here is that if we were to try to push this toward population equality, we would end up having to violate the other principles. What we're looking at in these 2 options is one that essentially acknowledges that the population in current Ward 3 is low and will remain low. And by definition, we can't say it's good, it's not good. It basically does not meet that expectation. If we were to expand Ward 3, especially to the south, and we tried that, it's not an area that's ever going to grow. It's wetland, it's marshes, it's not a place where we could just say, okay, in time, the population will increase. So we can't really move in that direction either. And indeed, were we to, as we did in a couple of cases, expand the Ward 3 either toward Port Perry or in the other direction, we would end up with communities of interest that really don't make sense. So again, if we were to try to do that, we'd violate that principle. And then, of course, so we recognize that there are limitations there. And we also recognize that some boundaries will still be what I call in the report, or our language calls notional. They're on the map, but they're not really things that people could see for themselves. So we acknowledge that these final options have, again, their own limitations. We don't believe they're as severe as the limitations in the current system, and so that's why we've brought these forward. Final option 1, essentially adjust the line between wards 2 and 5 to avoid that division, especially of the major retail, the downtown retail area, into 2 wards, putting that into 1 and leaving virtually the rest of that intact. The population, again, Ward 3 is going to be low, no matter how we do it. Ward 4, in this case, is high in the short term and drops into a better level. Again, that's acceptable. Ward 5 is large and increases just very slightly. Again, within the range. Ward 1 stays at what we call the optimal size. And there is a summary evaluation on the next slide, which is in the report, which captures some of the thinking behind those particular evaluations. Option 2 makes a change primarily it picks up the same change, but makes a change in the Ward 5 to try to keep it confined to the urbanized area and changes from what I called earlier notional lines to real lines. It follows roadways and other lines for the most part that are visible to people. Even the natural feature on the west side follows something that is there that people can see. So Ward 2 is a little more extreme, but basically leaves 2 of the wards untouched, and Ward 1 is only adjusted around that area along Ward 5. Again, the populations are very similar, not nearly as extreme. In fact, a better balance compared to the current system, and even to option 1. And again, the summary of our assessment of what leads to those particular conclusions. So, based on those, we recommend that the existing ward boundary, we conclude that the existing ward boundary configuration does not meet the expectation of the guiding principles, and Scugog would be better served by an alternative ward boundary configuration, and 2 recommended options address these shortcomings identified in the present system. The 2 options differ, I would say slightly, compared to the kinds of changes we could have made. They're slight changes, and we believe that the wards offer more effective representation in the current ward structure with minimal change to the existing wards. We do not have a preference for one or the other. The 2 final options differ in emphasis very slightly, but both, in our view, are defensible in the event that your ward boundary bylaw will appeal to the municipal board. We believe that both of these would be options that could be defended as achieving the goals behind the guiding principles. Stop there.
Okay. Thank you very much for that presentation. Questions to the presenters? Councillor Kett.
Thank you, Mayor. Not that I'm upset with either one of the proposals, but I just wondered, on the Ward 3, that's me, I just wondered if it was taken into consideration the 2,000 visitors on the weekend that go to one of the camping grounds, that we have the largest employer in Scugog, and there's 17,000 vehicles per day go up and down the Island Road.
I could say that the last 2 points you raised are not part of the guiding principles, never have been. I'm not aware of any cases where traffic counts are seen as a way to help define the roads. Employment is linked into other factors, but it's not a specific one we kept in mind. But we're aware that that's going on. We're aware that that ward is different, and that may be one of the reasons why council in its decision may choose to say we can live with a smaller population. let me speak quickly to the weekend. The definition of a seasonal resident, I think it's, Eric can help me with this a little bit, is normally associated with permanent dwellings of some sort. So campgrounds are not normally counted in a seasonal camp. Again, it may be part of the life of Ward 3 that would allow us to say, all right, the population is low on the normal measures we use, but we know that there are these other things going on.
And what about First Nations?
First Nations are not part of the municipality as far as we're concerned in terms of being voters or being represented around the work of most of us. But there's a direction that is unusual for many Ontario municipalities, but it's not a factor in the kinds of analysis that we've done.
I don't disagree with your findings, but I just want to comment that I know one thing for sure, that nobody on that First Nations is going to get off it without going on the municipal property. Thank you.
Any other questions to the presenters? Okay, I was just going to ask a question. Are you following up with something else?
Yes, I guess just to follow up with Councillor Arquette on the population and the First Nations. The population numbers are based on the census subdivision level data through census through StatsCan census data, which does not include the First Nations. The population of the First Nation, I believe, is around 150. And even if those numbers were included in the population numbers, they would not change the findings with respect to, the population imbalances in a very significant way.
Okay, Councillor Arquette.
I'm sorry, I just wanted to comment on that. I wasn't meaning to even include the population. I just meant that there's a number of things. We supply fire, we have to negotiate a contract, and things like that with them, and then so it is part of the community, but I'm just wondering how it was taken into consideration, that's all. Thank you.
And if I may, this is again part of the trade-off you have to make. If we determine that Ward 3's population is outside of the range, but there are other factors that need to be taken into account, that's where weighing up that principle versus the others becomes part of the choice that you should be making.
Okay, so I just had one question on the report. I couldn't identify in there how do you count the businesses as voting population, business owners and spouses? I see residential references, etc., but I know in certain wards it may be less material, but in some of the wards it is significantly material if you were to take employment lands or commercial.
No, thanks for the question. I mean, certainly from a metrics perspective, there is no tangible count of employment or business count data reflected in the analysis. It's strictly on population. Now, having said that, Bob mentioned earlier about issues such as communities of interest. Well, obviously, if you have a BIA or an employment area, clearly we want to be sensitive to where ward boundary lines are drawn, so not to split those types of communities of interest.
I guess my question was, is the representation by population as an overarching desire to solve? I just would look at the Municipal Act on who's eligible to vote and would think that would be part of the population. There'd be a metrics on that plus the commercial owners, because I know if those residents own businesses, they don't get 2 votes, but if they're non-residents that own commercial properties, they have votes. And it may not be material in this, but I just thought that would be noted that business concentrations in areas, specifically say the BIA area and the employment lands and future employment lands, because we're covering 3 electoral periods, that it would have some weighting on it, but may not be material, but just a reference to it.
Yeah, your point is well taken, that the numbers may not be that large. They are an important part of the community. We have to address them in that way, but it's very difficult to get a point that we can say that number shouldn't really matter. One of the dilemmas in all of this, of course, is that the Municipal Act uses a number of terms and a number of labels that are not necessarily compatible with each other. Residents, inhabitants, electors, citizens, they're all in there somewhere, but we've chosen to work with population, which is maybe not one of us, but it's a more embracing term, and so far, the idea of drawing representation around business ownership or strictly around electors is one that we set aside because, again, it comes out of Carter, but I won't go into all that right at the moment.
All right, no, I was just bringing up the question that was going through my mind as I was reading through the numbers, but any other questions from council? And we're going to be dealing with this in the staff report a little bit later in the agenda, so right now, motion to receive the presentation moved by Councillor Watton. We need a seconder for it, Councillor Kett. All those in favor? Carried. Thank you very much for your patience and the report, and we'll dealing with it very shortly. Thanks. Next up, we have delegation from Mr. Carpenter and Lauren Gratzis. Didn't know if you had the T in front of the Z. Negrasis and Scugog Environmental Advisory Committee, Phragmites Mapping Project, and Slowing Spread of Plants.
Good evening. Thank you. Good evening, Mayor, councilors, staff, members of the public. We're kind of excited to be here tonight because we wanted to introduce briefly an initiative that arose from the work plan of the Scugog Environmental Advisory Committee. And we had an opportunity this year to take an idea and bring it forth and actually make a project out of it. And the genesis of this was that invasive species are of concern. As we know, we talk about the emerald ash borer, we talk about all the other things that are invading North America from other jurisdictions. And here in Scugog, we had an opportunity to tackle one specific one that is not just a nuisance, but actually could have important economic and environmental impacts on the community. So in cooperation with the Ontario Federation of Anglers and Hunters, the township staff, and support of councils who sit on SEAC, we hired Lauren to start mapping a particular alien species, and I'll turn it over to Lauren now.
Thanks, Mr. Carpentier. So out of the OFAH, I work for the Invasive Species Awareness Program, so I like to make you aware and educate you about Phragmites, otherwise known as European common reed. To start, I'd like to give you an introduction about what Phragmites is. Originally, it was a grass that comes from Europe, and it likes to dominate wetlands and disturbed areas, which made it really successful coming over to North America from Europe. The main way that it spreads is through wind dispersal in terms of seeds, but also through rhizomes or root stems and root fragments from its large complex structure that it forms under the ground. In many cases, the root biomass highly exceeds the plant biomass of above ground Phragmites. I also have a diagram of the Phragmites life cycle, and the majority of growth and the flowering occurs from June to September, or the entire summer into the fall, and this is when Phragmites takes on its characteristic appearance and when it's most likely to spread to wetland and disturbed areas. Why Phragmites is considered invasive is because it has many detrimental effects to both economy and ecosystems. In terms of ecosystems, Phragmites likes to grow in dense monocultures and often overcrowds the rest of the biodiversity, including aquatic life in terms of animals and plants, and terrestrial life in forms of animals and plants. Not only does it this, it also releases secondary metabolites or toxins into the soil that inhibits the growth of other species and makes it a menace. In terms of economics, it impedes recreational activity. In particular, I like to draw an example in terms of boat launches. If Phragmites is able to establish along Lake Scugog, it'll be able to obstruct boat launches, and the monoculture is so dense that people can't walk through it, and boats and vehicles are unable to penetrate it when it becomes mature. In terms of terrestrial ecosystems and economics, it likes to grow along roadsides, particularly in ditches, where it is easily spread through equipment and has the environment that it prefers, that is disturbed and wet. And Phragmites can grow up to 15 feet in height and this greatly obscures any sight lines you have down the road and is a danger to traffic and drivers. The work that I'm doing to map the Phragmites in Scugog is primarily done through the app called EdMaps. This was designed by the Ontario Federation of Hunters and Anglers as well as universities, and in particular I use the one designed for Ontario. This application allows me to select the species, give a area distribution on a map, as well as describe the habitat that it's found and its density. Below I've included a distribution map for the area of Scugog and all the reports that are made. The red circles are reported sightings, and each report that's made is verified by someone from the OFAH to make sure that it's a verified sighting, and it's not just anyone submitting any accounts in case it is a misidentified plant species and it's not actually invasive. On the right, this is an example of my field notes. So it's a hand-generated distribution map. So as I drive through all of the wards and all the roads in Scugog, I'm able to make a mental map of the distribution of Phragmites as well as track my progress. And as of today, I've actually finished mapping all of Scugog and the Phragmite distributions, and I've made 176 entries with EdMaps and Phragmite sightings, which have all been confirmed and verified. The procedure that I'm using now is also applicable to different species that are invasive, in particular wild parsnip and Japanese knotweed, which have been previously identified in the Scugog municipality and would be a potential future project that this kind of mapping can be applied to. The ways we can educate and bring awareness to invasive species comes from management and policy. So one example I have is some materials that I've collected from the Ontario Invasive Plant Council, and we can adapt from this. And this policy basically brings education and awareness to people using equipment that breaks soil and other endeavors on how to clean their equipment properly to reduce the spread of invasive species, because once they're established, they're very difficult to manage. So to reduce, it's easier to stop their spread than wait for them to become an issue and later get rid of them, because in many cases, invasive species can never be fully eradicated, but proper management can reduce their impact and their spread and make them much more controllable. So like I said, I have materials given to me from the OFAH that we can distribute to people of interest, which highlights the guidelines to properly clean equipment to make the species more manageable and stop the spread and slow the distribution across the Scugog municipality.
Okay, before we go to questions, there's a couple of references up there. Just thank you, Lauren. Lauren is a student who's going to be going back to do her master's, and just having worked with this young lady for this period of time, I'm very impressed with her. Just sort of acknowledge that publicly here. She's taken a project with not a lot of guidance, and she's done a wonderful job with it. And it's a project that's going to lead us into the future here a little bit. Scugog now is one of the best mapped townships in municipalities in the province. It probably is the best one now with respect to Phragmites. And it may not sound like a big deal, but it's important to know where you are at a starting point if you're going to have a successful eradication program or even try to have one here. Scugog is unique in Durham region, perhaps also including Uxbridge and Brock because we're the northern communities, that Phragmites is established clearly because we have more than 170 sites for it. But if you go to the south of us, you'll see that the concentrations are much bigger, much more difficult to manage down there. So we're at a point up here where we can at least try to protect the wetlands, because if we don't do something, it's going to be a huge problem. The purpose of tonight's delegation is to ask Council to support our recommendation being SEAC, that you implement the protocol that Lauren spoke about with respect to cleaning of equipment that is used either by township staff in the maintenance of the roads or the wetland areas where an invasive species might be contacted, and that any contracts that you give out for municipal work also include a clause that said they have to comply with the clean equipment protocols. We'll be providing those specific protocols to Council and to staff, so you're aware of this. And that's the purpose of tonight, though, is to ask for your support in that.
Okay. Well, I want to say that's fascinating, but I mean it's also sobering to see that how many sites there are in Scugog Township. So I do appreciate all the work that the SEAC has the initiatives of doing this mapping, but also the results from this. So congratulations, and we're very appreciative so that you've undertaken this without direction from us, but from the other way, which is a perfect example of a committee with an interest such as the Environmental Advisory Committee. So thank you for doing this, taking this on, and thank you for your student involvement, and I think that's something to put, hang your hat on, with being able to truly identify this as being one of the most advanced mapping in municipalities. So I will now hand it over to questions from council. Councillor Watton first, Councillor Drew, Councillor Guido.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you, Jeff and Lauren. I have a question. You speak of the best management practices in Ontario, and the policy, and I have made a copy of that. And my question would be, do we know, either SEAC or perhaps you, Lauren, of other municipalities that may have created policies for the cleaning of equipment or the protocol, or even within Durham Region?
I don't have a particular Durham Region example, but I have read a study, a 109-page study of a eradication process taken over by Lambark municipality, I think it is, which is near Windsor, and their Phragmites invasion was so extreme that they had to take initiative to eradicate it. So theirs was more directed in terms of management, but if I went back and combed through it, I'm sure I could find examples where they had to implement policy to make sure that the reinfestation didn't occur. So there have been previous municipalities that have undertaken a Phragmites management approach, and in order to, like I said, maintain their eradication process, they must have implemented some sort of policy to prevent a future invasion.
One of the things that you'll find when you start dealing with Phragmites is, although it's been here for many years, most of the municipalities ignored it for decades, literally. And it was only in the Southwest, when the wetlands literally were being overtaken, that they started to take affirmative action. One thing you'll find in Durham Region is that Durham Region itself doesn't have a policy with respect to invasives. And that's a pretty important gap in the knowledge, because now you're left once again with the small municipalities to pick up the ball and try to deal with this, whereas it's better if we had a larger municipality for support in behind this. As far as I know, there's nobody else in Durham Region that has adopted this management policy. It's something that SEAC will be encouraging through the region, hopefully, that they do introduce this type of policy everywhere else, because everybody's going to be in the same boat that we are pretty soon.
And further to that, given that, just looking at the clean equipment protocol, I would suggest that there would be huge changes, but also quite possibly a lot of time involved if you are moving, i.e. I believe one of the sites is fairly invasive along Reach Street, right? So if we're doing ditching or anything to have our equipment cleaned, it would have to be cleaned, the way I understand it, on site. And I'm not really sure. I guess basically cost and time of doing that would have to be taken into consideration.
What we're considering, just because we do realize that you can create the gold standard, or you can do something that lesser that actually has a significant environmental benefit. And here, we're not asking that the vehicles be washed on site or anything like that, because that's a huge cost that could be interpreted within the protocols. What we're looking at is to make sure that the treads on the vehicles or the undercarriage is inspected. If there are clumps of dirt and stuff on there, before you leave that site and go to another clean site, that those are scraped off and either dropped on the ground in the ditch area, or if you're taking the debris away, loaded as part of that. So it really is, what we're suggesting really will take a little bit of time, but the cost is very low, and the time that we're asking for is pretty minimal, but the benefit is huge.
Right. Is it Was it around Lake Huron where they've done or which
No,
major?
we're in Lake Erie.
Lake Erie, where it's been so, a huge, problem. Okay, if I might afterwards, I would like to, suggest that staff explore the possibilities of, adopting a policy, for clean equipment protocol, to help prevent it at least.
Okay, and I know, in the SEAC Advisory Committee minutes, was there a recommendation for endorsement of that in the minutes?
I forget.
Okay.
I know we discussed...
400 pages in our agenda, that's why I was asking you, because I couldn't remember.
I apologize. Maybe the councilors remember.
In the meantime, we'll circle back
We did.
around.
Oh.
So, next up is Councillor Drew.
Thank you. Thank you for your presentation, and thank you for the great work you've done. Put us on the map again. Years ago, there was the Purple Loosestrife, and groups of volunteers went out and actually pulled it. I know that the Phragmites root system is pretty invasive, pretty strong, goes under roadways and breaks up roads, as I understand it. But is there any benefit to having volunteers, as well as maybe township staff, but actually stop the reseeding by taking those tops off, or before they get to the point where they're going to be reseeding or blowing seeds away?
There have been suggested management practices to reduce the spread, because as you said, the root system is the main driving factor that causes it to spread. However, like impeding the growth of the top shoots will force the plants to allocate resources to grow the sprouts again, because without the leaves to photosynthesize, they'll slowly die. So to slow the process of spread, it has been done where they cut the tops off the plants, particularly at the root-shoot interface, so where the shoot comes out of the soil, because it does stop the flowering and the production of seeds, which will help slow this dispersal. In the grand scheme of things, it might have a lesser impact, but any impact to slow an invasive species will have an overarching effect later on. So having volunteers start some management physically by removing biomass is a step in the right direction to minimize it, and particularly, even if it's not as effective, it's a good way to bring awareness and education, which will further slow the spread of invasive species, because once someone interacts with a species and realizes the threat that it's causing, they become more conscientious of their efforts spreading the invasive species. So in terms of slowing the spread of the invasive species, it will have an impact, but I think a greater impact will come from the education and the actual hands-on experience that people are having with the invasive Phragmites themselves.
Okay, thank you. It was fairly successful for Purple Loosestrife, as I understand it.
They're very different plants. I mean, physically and just their behavior, their means to reproduce are very different as well. And as you suggested, these underground rhizomes that can literally penetrate the asphalt with no difficulty at all are a challenge. One of the things that we'll be coming back to council with eventually, once we get Lauren's report and have a chance to digest it all, is that we will be looking at suggestions for control programs in the future. One of those does involve community engagement, where we literally will go out in a key area, a small area, and dig it out. So we're thinking, for example, on the Causeway, there's a couple of spots on the 12th line of Scugog as well. These are both in critical environmentally important areas to us. You don't have any chemicals available to you for aquatic situations, so we're left with some kind of mechanical cutting, digging, pulling, something like that, which not ideal, but you have what you have.
Thank you. Great work. Thank you.
Next up, we have Councillor Guido.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Councillor Watton asked my questions, but I would like to point out that on page 150 of our agenda, there is a recommendation from SEAC outlining that we do that a protocol is prepared for township vehicles or contractors.
Thank you for clarifying. I get up at 4 o'clock every day to do surveys. This is a late day for me.
Well, okay. So yes, I pulled that for you, Councillor Watton. Councillor Kett and Councillor Mang.
Thank you, Mayor. I guess my one suggestion would be if there's any way we could have that on our website as well. Just a protocol for cleaning equipment, even for the residents. But the thing that interested me, and I'm at every meeting, almost, anyways, is the toxic. I must have missed all that.
Yeah, the secondary metabolites are toxic to other plant life. So oftentimes they'll release things into the soil, similar to how coniferous plants, their needles are acidic, and when they fall, you'll notice that many times the leaf litter under pine trees won't grow any other plants. It's because the tannins or secondary metabolites slows and stops the growth of other plants. So in terms of mechanism, Phragmites employs the same secondary metabolites. In terms of what they do is that it slows the growth of other plant species that would act as competitors in terms of like space and resources.
So how would we get rid of it?
Over time, that would just have to be something over time that would...
I mean, if we cut off the product, or the stem, at the stem, what would we do with what we cut off?
They suggest that with the stems that you put them in black plastic bags and you basically leave them out in the sun to kill off any viable plant material. If you're worried about the secondary metabolites, those are not left in the biomass. They're just exuded through the root structures, and it's not potent enough to have a lasting effect in the soil.
Thank you. Great job.
Thank you.
Councillor Back.
Thank you, through the mayor, and I'm assuming you get up at 4 o'clock to view birds?
I do.
Yeah, my dog goes outside at 4 o'clock and I hear them starting to chitter, so they are up at 4. I have a question with regards to staff, on their opinion, if they want to do a report, or are you comfortable now in adopting the request? Because I know there's a lot on your plate.
We'll come back to that when we pull the report. And
Okay,
then
I'll ask that question again.
Okay. Councillor Somerville?
Thank you. Nice presentation, Lauren. That was really well done.
Thank you.
You can see we're in a master's program. That's great. These things are scary, and I would really like to see the media, you guys, please do a report on these in the paper, because this is really important. People are actually taking these and making flower arrangements out of them, and they don't realize that these are invasive species. So that's just to you guys. Now, my other question is there any other way we can eradicate them other than making sure that we don't, we cut them off, we can't spray, we make sure the equipment is washed afterwards? I don't think that's a big, or looked after, cleaned. Is there any other way that we can eradicate these?
Just the digs, where we would have to physically get a team together, choose an area that's manageable, and literally dig it out. That's basically your options, and I don't think there's anything else.
There's a few other options, but I don't think many of them would be feasible for the Township of Scugog. One of them is prescribed burning, and I don't think that's a great one, especially when we live in a wetland. Other one is drowning, where you cut the stem below, if it grows in water, you cut the stem below the water. However, for it to be really effective, you need to have, I think, something like 1.5 feet above water surface for it to be really effective, which is also not very feasible for an area like this unless you plan on flooding. But given the size and area that these plants cover, it's not a great option.
What's the percentage, Jeff, that does get removed with equipment, taken to another? Do you think there's a lot?
I think most of the roadside invasion is equipment related. If you look at where we're finding this stuff, probably 90% maybe of it will occur along a roadway. There's a little bit where the seeds get wind-blown or they get carried by an animal or something like that, but look at along Highway 12, look at Lake Ridge, look at Simcoe Street. That's where your Phragmites is, and it's being carried along there on the vehicles, whether they're recreational vehicles or service vehicles of some kind. And then you also have the corridor, so even then, once you get it established in these pockets, then you get the wind that will pick up the seeds and they'll blow them along these windy corridors.
Exactly, yeah. Okay, I will second Wilma's when it comes time to do that.
So I just, clarification on provincial and regional right-of-ways for those highways. Is there some, we're talking about, endorsing or creating a policy that deals with staff and contractors, but a lot of times the other right-of-ways which don't have to come to us or deal with our policies, they have their own regional right-of-ways or provincial right-of-ways. Has there been anything you've come across that deals with that?
Well, SEAC will be developing a recommendation to Regional Council. We're in our infancy. This project was started this year. We've made huge strides in the course of 2 months, really, going from an idea to delivering on this project. We want to understand what we have here. If we can get council support for this protocol, then that gives us some ammunition to then go to the region and say, okay, you got all your regional roads cutting through all of our boundaries, you need to step up and do at least that with respect to management of this.
Okay, thank you. Any other final questions for the delegation? Well, thanks again on behalf of the township. Excellent work and great example for the rest of the Ontario. So, thanks again. And I have a mover, Councillor Somerville, to receive the delegation, seconded by Councillor Watton. All those in favor? Carried. And we will come back to the recommendations from SEAC.
Do you need us to stay for that part of it?
No, I think we can.
We're good.
Can have staff get clarifications on anything afterwards. We can just get the general guidance for it. So,
thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Next up is my favorite part, is the consent agenda item number 10.
Wait a minute, I thought we were the favorite part.
That doesn't involve delegations and presentations. Consent agenda, just a reminder, we're dealing with items 10.1, which include the council minutes. It is predetermined that we're going to pull 10.1.4 for the pecuniary interest from Councillor Guido. The advisory committees, boards minutes, and departmental reports, correspondence, the agenda, consent agenda was circulated for extractions. So just to identify here what has been pulled, 10.1.4 because of pecuniary interest, 10.1.5 for Councillor Guido, 10.1.6 Councillor Drew, 10.1.8 Councillor Drew, 10.1.10 Councillor Guido, 10.112 Councillor Somerville, 10.1.16 now the SEAC committee minutes, and 10.2.2 Councillor Guido, Ward Boundary Review, and then 3 items of correspondence by 10.3.1, .2, and .3 by Councillor Drew, Councillor Somerville, and Councillor Drew. And then we also have another extract item which is after the consent agenda, dealing with the bylaws. Councillor Back, did you lead 10.2.1 pulled? To BIA government?
Yes, and,
10.1.5, I have 2 questions. So that's just the overall recommendations?
Already pulled, so. Any other pulls? I'm not going to pull it, I'm just going to have a question on the traffic bylaw, so I'm just going to, well, actually I'm going to pull it because it's, any other items? Seeing none, so on the remainder of the items that were not pulled, I need a mover. I'll move by Councillor Drew, second by Councillor Watton, that the items under the consent agenda be approved, save and accept items being extracted. Any questions on those final pulls? Seeing none, all those in favor? Carried. Next item we go to is one pecuniary interest, which was 10.1.4, Planning and Community Affairs Committee minutes. Pecuniary interest by Councillor Guido, so any questions or items on that? Seeing none, all but Councillor Guido, all those in favor? Carried. Next item, Councillor Guido, 10.1.5, Summary Advisory. Sorry, I need a mover and a seconder for that item. Councillor Watton, seconded by Councillor Drew. make it official. All those in favor? All those in favor? No, this is for the pecuniary interest for 10.1.4. I just want to make this official. All those in favor, except for Councillor Guido. All those in favor? Carry. No, I would just wanted to re-vote so it was moved and then voted on. Next item, 10.1.5, Councillor Guido.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just a clarification regarding the minutes from the Accessibility Committee, specifically on page 72, regarding their last recommendation there on the page that staff hire a summer student in 2008 to focus on documents posted on the township website. I would like to have that referred to the budget, just to ensure that this is captured in Diane's budget planning for 2018. But if I could also ask the clerk, how are our documents currently on our website for accessibility? How is that managed today?
Before we go any further, I wanted to have this moved by Councillor Guido. You pulled it. I need a seconder for it so that it's on the floor. Councillor Kett. Mr. Clerk, were you?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and through you to the councillor. Currently, our website is managed by several different staff from each department who upload documents. In terms of accessibility, our web provider, eSolution, does have an accessibility checker within the website program itself. So staff can actually do a accessibility check through the website that we currently use.
Perhaps Councillor Watton from the committee could also expand. Maybe there's more to the motion than a recommendation.
I think basically the recommendation is the result of some problems with the accessibility documents, or the accessibility of documents by the mover at that meeting, who is sight impaired, and he has had trouble accessing them. So I think that's what precipitated the motion. So perhaps we could suggest that whoever is operating our web make sure that they are accessible, and we can ask Kyle to further monitor it or something, but he was quite adamant that there is a lot on our site that is not accessible.
So I just wanted to clarify, Councillor Guido, pulling this was because the recommendation was to hire a summer student for 2018 to deal with the shortcomings on the AODA and the website, and you're saying you just want to make sure it was circled through the treasurer.
Correct, Mr. Mayor. My reason was only so that the Director of Finance could ensure that this was in budget consideration.
Yeah. Okay. So, Councillor Back?
Thank you. Through the Mayor, I also had a question regarding this. Is there also not, with the summer what is it? It's the SEP, I believe, the Summer Employment Program grant? Would there not be I know the different, I didn't apply for any this year, so I'm sort of taking a gray area here, but they have different categories, and I'm pretty sure there's one with regards to accessibility. And we are not limited to the amount that we can apply for, a number of different students that we want to apply in the different areas that they have, say trails or parks and different things. Would staff want to investigate looking at that? It's usually a 30-day, you get a student for 30 days for about 7.5 hours a day, and it's paid by the province. Could we look into that as well?
Well, I would say to take that as a direction on top of that, and my understanding is that anything involving financial that's on here would automatically go back to the budget process, right? So I don't think we need to change the way this is endorsed. It's going to automatically go back to there, and looking at staff that will make notes on that.
Thank you.
Any other, Councillor Watton?
Just for clarity, then I can suggest we have a meeting on Thursday. I'm okay to just tell them that staff will review their recommendations, or what would you like me to tell them?
We're endorsing the recommendation, and it's going to go through the proper process of the budget. Councillor Drew?
I'm just wondering, it may not be necessary to hire a student if we have staff investigate with our provider or service provider, whatever it is, address those specific situations, and maybe it can be resolved and without getting a summer student for the whole summer on one situation.
And
I'm wondering if I could make an amendment that staff investigate the specific problems and how our web provider can address those.
Sure, but I think there should be consultation also with the committee to make sure, to make that clarified. So, that's moved by Councillor Guido and seconded by Councillor Kett, I think it is. So, and this is one item of the recommendations, so I want to come back to it because we're dealing with the recommendations from the advisory committee minutes. So because this is one of the advisory committee minutes, I just want to make sure that we extract this one out separately and deal with it, so that we want to make sure that it's captured properly. So, Mr. Clerk, what do you have there as a clarification on?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and through to the councillor. We do have a summer intern in the IT department at the moment that we could possibly have look at these types of issues. We would certainly appreciate from Councillor Watton, the gentleman who's on your committee who's having the issues, if you could please provide those to us. We certainly want to correct those issues. So if you certainly come across any of those issues, especially within our accessibility department, please provide those to staff, and we would certainly look at addressing those, absolutely.
And I might add, it would be better to deal with this instead of waiting till 2018, because it's a whole year from now, so...
And I didn't realize that we had someone on from the west that was doing it, so that's where it needs to be directed.
Okay, so is this capturing that staff are going to look into the matter first and look at resolutions, and then, but also supporting if additional resources are needed, that we support it? Is that captured in that?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So at the moment we have a referring of the summer student to the 2018 budget process, so that would have to be addressed because that is within the minutes currently. So you would have to decide what you would like to do with that, and then if you would like an additional motion from Councillor Drew to investigate specific problems, staff will take that on board in any case, with or without a motion from council.
Okay, Councillor Watton.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and I think given the conversation, we could support this recommendation, and should everything be resolved, it would clean itself up without the budget or the requirement.
Okay, so then do we need that, if it's taken as staff direction, do we need to make the changes on there if we're just supporting the recommendation that it gets referred to the budget? Yeah. Yeah, okay. So the amendments withdrawn, we'll just refer to the budget and staff will take the direction, and then if it gets dealt with, then we can deal with it, the budget process. Any other questions on, then we don't have to extract that particular one, it's going to be part of the rest of them. So any other questions on this particular one, and then we'll move on to any other recommendations within those minutes? Okay, any other minutes from that particular item that was extracted? Okay, seeing none, all those in favor? Carried. Next item is Councillor Drew, is 10.1.6, Canada 150 Music Festival Advisory Committee, May 17th.
There was the question about WAGJAG, or the recommendation about WAGJAG on page 70. That's, I guess, in the minutes, is it, or in any case? I'll address it when I get to the minutes. Thank you.
Yeah, this is,
Yeah, I know.
Yeah,
I
so-
know. I
so
realize
it-
that. I'll address it when I get to the minutes.
so this, yeah, we're dealing with the full minutes right now of this consent agenda. So recommendation was just a summary for us to, 79?
For me then?
Yep.
Okay. It has to do with WagJag. I'm just wondering if, I know I've heard a few comments about it, the WagJag,
The WagJag offer coming out after people had paid full price, and I'm wondering if that has been an issue that other people have heard, and how is it being resolved, and how many tickets have been sold by WagJag. Just curious why, I mean, that might have been a good, WagJag might have been a good thing to do at the very beginning, and then, you know, go into full price afterwards.
Members from the committee, Councillor Back?
Thank you, through the mayor. And our communications manager has, I believe she had spoken to one individual that had called her regarding WagJag, and it just launched, I believe, on the 15th or 16th of this month, and it was part of our marketing strategy. So to see how sales, you wouldn't, it's not a typical marketing strategy to put any special or discount on a launch of a concert ticket initially. As we're getting closer to the event, it's just sort of a process in which, you know, you can offer a special and see if you can get more uptake. But it was a part of our strategy along the way for our marketing, and I can't give you numbers on how many have been purchased from WagJag, because I believe as of our last meeting last Wednesday, I think it was just launched that afternoon.
Any other questions on this item that was pulled? Councillor Drew, can I have you as the, are you moving these minutes? They're all in actually summary of advisory committee recommendations. 10.1.6 and 10.1.8. Are you moving those, that one that you just pulled, 10.1.6? No? Okay. Do we need a mover for those minutes? Councillor Guido? Second. Okay, so no further questions on 10.1.6. All those in favor? Carried. Next item, 10.1.8. Same mover, same seconder for that, minutes. Councillor Kett? All right, all those, sorry, questions, Councillor Drew?
Yes, I'm wondering, what you got Aaron Pritchett coming on at 10:30.
What is there going to be enough time from the earlier entertainment for people to get down for the fireworks? What time does the earlier entertainment end?
Councillor Back?
Thank you, through the mayor. I'm just trying to think on the top of my head when the two opening acts come on. I don't think that there is going to be a lull per se for people to leave the event and go down to the fireworks. It's more out of respect that we had pushed back the headline act, the opening act, to 10:30 for after the fireworks, in order for people that wanted to attend both events to safely do so and get from the Palmer Park up to the fairgrounds. And so the opening acts, there's going to be two opening acts, and if there is a lull between the performers and the headliner, we would have the KX96 boombox is going to be there offering music so that there's no dead time, because you're not going to move people from a tented parked area to come down and back, but it's more for the people that are going to be at Palmer Park to be able to leave and get to the fairgrounds and not miss the act, the opening.
Or not the opening.
opening the headliner.
Councillor Guido?
Thank you. I just pulled up Scugog Summer Jam on Facebook, and to answer Councillor Drew, pre-opening live music on stage at 7, and then Marshall Dane is at 8, and Brooklyn Roebuck is at 9, and then the headliners at 10:30.
Thank you.
Any other questions on this? Right. Seeing none, all those in favor? Carried. Next item is Councillor Guido, 10.110, which is Scugog Accessibility Advisory Committee. That's what you've already pulled and dealt with. It's because we pulled it in the summary. That's where the confusion was at the beginning, so we've already voted on that. Do you need a second vote because it's pulled? Okay. So, moved by Councillor Guido. We need a seconder for that motion. Councillor Watton. Okay. Yep. So, all those in favor? Carried. Next item is Councillor Somerville, 10.112.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. This is to Councillor Cat or Councillor Back. This on page 105. They've got Mr. Benzowski. Something about 289 North Street. Is this the house been placed on the Heritage Register? Because this is it? Go ahead.
Councillor Cat?
It was a house that's recently been purchased, and it's been advised to be put on the registry. We're going through that procedure right now. And he was at our meeting on June the 20th.
So, what's his plan?
We're not exactly sure, and he wasn't exactly sure. He really didn't even know why he showed up, but he did want to develop the property of somewhat, and we really don't know. He hasn't got any plans or anything. He hasn't submitted anything.
Okay, so there's a heritage value statement going to him?
I'm not sure. I'm not sure how far in the process we are. Excuse me. He was just inquiring about it.
Okay.
Any other questions on this item? Did I fail to get a mover and a seconder for it? I did. Councillor Somerville, seconded by Councillor Kett. All those in favor? Carried. Next item is Scugog SEAC Environmental Advisory Committee, moved by Councillor Watton, seconded by Councillor Somerville. Councillor Watton? You had pulled the SEAC,
No, you gave that to me because I was gonna make that
Yep.
motion for the recommendation.
So that's why I pulled it, so that you could,
Basically, I like to endorse it.
so it's going to be endorsed. Is there anything additional that we need to give staff on that? Because it's endorsed, it talks about a cleaning, equipment cleaning on page 150, I think it was. Yeah. So it says that a clean equipment protocol be prepared for any township vehicle or contractor working within the township, and I think we should refer to staff, yeah, for the...
Yeah.
Yeah, I was wondering.
Okay. All right, so, yes, Councillor Kett?
And I also wanted to find out if we could have that put on our website, just a recommendation for all contractors, just as a page on the website.
Yeah, once the process is determined, and make sure that we're doing that, I think that would be taken as note. Councillor Back?
Thank you, through the mayor, and I have another question regarding the minutes of this one too, but I'll ask my question again to Ms. Coleman. What would be your preference, that we refer this to you and that there's a staff report, or are you comfortable with endorsing as presented tonight?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to the councillor, I believe all policies have to come through council, so it would have to come back to council for that, but the report, if there was a report, would be very brief.
Okay. Councillor Back for further...
I have a question on page 77. The committee recommendation with regards to, I think this is the correct one. Maybe it's not.
Is that
we on,
the-
I think, maybe not, are we on 10.1.13, or is
Yeah.
there another one snuck in there? Never mind, I need one for that one.
Which? Okay, so is it to do with the SEAC? Nothing to do with SEAC? Okay, so SEAC, we're gonna, refer that to staff to create a policy, but, are there any other endorsements in there that, we had to deal with by receiving the minutes? We'll do it as two separate, motions. I haven't given you a mover, or you did give you a mover and a seconder for all the minutes, which will be, received, or to be endorsed. Do you want it worded as save and accept? Okay, yeah, so save and accept. Yep. That's exactly what I was trying to do. Okay, so that we, you want to read what you have there? So that, go ahead. That the clean equipment protocol be referred to staff for report back to council, and that the remainder of the minutes be endorsed. That's what I was trying to capture. All those, any questions on that? All those in favor? Carried. Next item, Councillor Back, what were you referring to?
10.1.13.
10.1.13, you mean? 10 point...
Yes.
Healthy Lake Scugog?
Yes.
We've already dealt with that in the consent agenda. Is there a question you have?
I did have a question, and that's when I had my hand up earlier, because I didn't put
Oh,
my
I can
name
come
on there.
back to you
No.
for when you're looking at that, so,
It's a quick and easy one.
okay, just go ahead with your question.
On page 77, the recommendation for committee-approved KCA to authorize immediate release of work in the amount of $30,600. Where's that money coming from? For
I think
the...
that's an easy question, Councillor Drew.
Yep.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. That money is coming from the fundraising that's already established. We have more than enough to cover that.
Okay, good, so we didn't...
And just, if I might, Mr. Mayor, we have now endorsed a revised plan to go forward for the environmental assessment, and it reduces the area to be dredged, but it affects the places that we really need to have dredged. In other words, a part of the middle of the lake, you know, between the island and Port Perry shoreline, is reduced. But John Mackey from the marina said that it was not an issue for boating, because that particular area is not used as much, and it would still be fine for the dragon boat races and canoeing and all of that. So it will reduce our costs. It will reduce the we have to have a letter of credit, so to speak, from the ministry, or for the ministry, in case that there is any damage for fish and wildlife, and that has to be in place for a number of years. So it will also reduce that that letter of credit, whatever it may be. We don't know what that's going to be yet.
Okay. Since we didn't pull that item, we're moving on to 10.2.1, which is BIA governance. Councillor Back? You moved it, sorry, Councillor Back moved it. You're moving it? I want to get these on the floor
Yes,
properly.
so, and...
Seconded by Councillor Watt.
And I have a slight amendment, so let me know when I'm to...
Sure, it's yours,
okay.
you know. If you can, do you want to speak to what your... You want to speak to the amendment, do you want to make the amendment now, or what's the...
I'll make the amendment now, so we'll have the motion and recommendation as is, and at the end, that staff investigate amending the boundaries of the Port Perry BIA and report back to council.
Do you have a seconder for that amendment? Councillor Guido? Oh, sorry. Councillor Watton was the original seconder on that, sorry. You okay with that? Okay. All right, so, just, could you read that, you've got it there, do you? Okay. That, in addition to the, bylaw, that staff investigate amending the boundaries of the Port Perry BIA and report back to council. Any other questions on that? Councillor Kett?
Thank you, Mayor. My question is this a new boundary, or is this the existing boundary that's been for the BIA?
Investigate, how are you interpreting that as a boundary investigation from that motion, the way it's done?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to the councillor, in my report, there's no changes to the boundary in the governance review. This motion I'm interpreting as investigating how to amend the boundaries of the Port Perry BIA.
It would still have to come back to
my question, like, when the map came in and everything was I didn't know if it was changed or not, so that's my question.
No changes, so it's just the process. Okay, any other questions on that? Seeing none, all those in favor? Carried. Next item, Councillor Guido, ward boundary review options. Need a seconder for that if we don't have one already. And we need to choose an option. So, Councillor Guido, you're pulling it. Are you moving it then?
Sure, I pulled it for the mere fact that it said one or two, so we had to make a decision.
So, are you moving it with an option?
I'm moving it.
Okay, so we'll have the discussion based on that. Councillor Kett, are you seconding that? Sure. Okay, so it's been moved, but we still have to determine the option 1 versus 2 or something else. To the mover and the seconder, you want to speak to it first, Councillor Kett?
Yeah, we were only offered 2 options, but the third option would be just leave it the way it is.
Yes, that could be an option. We can make it 1 ward if we want to, with 18 councillors if we want. So, I'm just, we just basically have to give direction on this, so, we need a bigger council chamber though. So, if we have option 1 or 2 as presented, or any other items, then now's the time to deal with it. So, do you have any recommendations? All right, any other, Councillor Back?
Thank you, through the mayor. Or we could also make those wards larger and have only 3 councillors, but would make our meeting shorter, I think. I'd like to ask Director Heritage, of those 2 options that he gave, because Ward 5, the 2 gentlemen that came, Ward 5 is the one that's most affected, and then Ward 1. Which would you prefer? Because, I mean, there's only a slight difference of 100 and some odd residents.
Well, through you, Mr. Mayor, to the councillor, it's actually J.P. Newman's report. It's not coming from me.
And I don't want it to...
Sorry, geography and land, I think you...
So, and I wouldn't want Mr. Newman to be involved with anything that would involve political on it. I know that the recommendations, we were given the report from the consultants for a reason. It was arm's length from the municipality and given recommendations and why. So, if Mr. Newman wants to add something, you're welcome to, but I understand completely if it's, is there nothing for you to add?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and through you to the councillor. I wasn't involved with the the investigation or any portion of the investigation or putting these options together. It's purely come from the consultant team. Just looking at the options, like, you know, and this just purely subjective in looking at the options that you've been presented today, option 2 seems to fit more of the criteria, the guiding principles, but that's just simply looking at the report that was presented today.
If I recall, the 2 options that they preferred, really the slight difference is just the geographical line, I guess, being streets for, I think that's the second option for the one that it would actually, instead of being in the middle of the field, it would be on an actual street.
It was Cockers Creek specifically for the employment lands. Instead of it splitting employment lands with an imaginary line, it would be a geographical delineator, and my opinion is, especially when we're doing a master plan that's coming up in the future, that you may want to separate that.
So this is my question. So option D, I believe, is it D or C? It's that they have of one of their final option, no, it's C, is largely successful with the township feedback from the residents. And then on their figure 15, where is their option 2, which has that sort of fictitious line? They change it to a more natural line of the creek. Where is that?
The consultants said in their presentation that they didn't take those exact options, that they tweaked them and came up with 1 and 2 as dealing with the geographical delineator from that.
But they're still then addressing the largely successful for the communities of interest, topographical and effective representation. So then option 2 makes more sense in a you have to make sure that the residents are happy, and then topographically on a map. Because I know right now, Betty and I have disagreements, friendly disagreements on where our boundaries, where they are, because there is a fictitious line of where they actually end.
Yeah, so just page 217 is the blow-up of the Ward 216, 216 to 17, 206. We're going to make sure that's option. I have 210 with option 1, and then option 2 starts at 216, where it shows Ward 2, option 2, Ward 1, and you can see the delineator line that Ward 1 includes all of the employment lands, with the Cockers Creek as a divider, and Ward 5, the significant adjustments there is Cockers Creek. My notes were that for that reason is why I preferred option 2, and it also doesn't have the Queen Street divide. Those are the 2 major items. So, with that being said, is anybody willing to put forward option 2 as the recommended? Councillor, who do I have as moved? Councillor Guido and Councillor Kett. You accept that as a friendly amendment, or just to add that as an amendment to the motion that's there as option 2? Councillor Kett?
I could, but I'm losing some wetlands.
Councillor, okay. So any other, we've got it as option 2 in the motion there. Any other questions on that? Seeing none, all those in favor? Carried. Done. Next item. Councillor Drew with 10.3.1 correspondence. And I just want to make sure, I seem to be failing on flipping these, which if anybody has pre-moved it, Councillor, they're all moved together with Councillor Somerville and Councillor Drew. So we'll deal with item 10.3.1.
I'd like to refer this to the Housing Committee, or to send it to the Housing Committee for their information.
So you want
to take that as direction?
Direction?
Yeah.
That's fine. Switch to directions. Okay. Next.
Can I pull 10.3?
We've got 10.2 and 10.3 all together. We're working here.
Okay, good.
So, any other questions on 10.3.1? Okay, 10.3.2. Councillor Somerville?
Oh, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yes, I would just like that one placed on our bulletin board in the paper. So I think that is, it's a youth forum, and I think that would be good for our youth to participate in that ripple effect.
You're talking about the newspaper bulletin board that we have?
Yes, correct.
Okay, I'm just looking at, what are the dates and details of it here?
It's July the 19th.
July 19th. Just to make sure we didn't miss it. Okay, is that simply a direction that can be taken from staff? Sure. Okay, next item, Winding Roads Country Festival, Councillor Drew?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I would like to move that the rezoning fee for the Big Brothers Big Sisters event, Winding Roads Country Music Festival, be waived, and that the sign fee would still be applicable.
Okay, let me apologize for that. That was a separate one, so we're going to deal with 10.3.1, 10.3.2, moved by Councillor Somerville, second by Councillor Drew. We've already dealt with the questions on that. All those in favor? Carried. Next, 10.3.3 was moved by Councillor Guido, seconded by Councillor Watton, and that the fees be waived for the rezoning bylaw amendment, save and accept $200 for the required development sign for the Winding Roads Country Festival.
Okay.
Is that what you were?
Yep.
And I apologize for not being synchronized with these pre-signed motions. Any other questions on that particular item for Winding Roads? Is there any comment about timing or anything? Just wanted to manage expectations. Okay. All right. No further questions. All those in favor? Carried. Next item is I wanted to make sure that 10.4 traffic bylaw 4517. I just noticed that there was a schedule on there. So before it was passed, there's reference to all the accessible parking spots, but we had previously passed that there would be one in front of the Old Flame. So I just wanted to make note of that we have that in this bylaw now when we're passing it, so that it's identified, if that's going to be happening based on our previous motion. I guess I want clarification, maybe Ms. Coleman, if you could clarify that is happening, or, because I know it was part of the motion that it was going to be contributed to.
Yes, I can add that to the bylaw before it gets signed. I don't know if I need any direction from council.
So procedurally, we read it the first and second time, make the amendment, and then read it the final time. So I just wanted to clarify that we weren't jumping the gun. I just didn't want this to be just recently passed and then be missing that other spot on there, so. Okay. All right, so we have a separate, Mr. Clerk, help me find the mover and seconder for that. Councillor Watton, seconded by Councillor Guido. The traffic bylaw, which was 4517, read a first and second time amendments to it, that the bylaw be amended to include the accessible parking space in front of the Old Flame Brewery. We need a mover and seconder for that amendment. Okay. Councillor Watt and Councillor Guido, that amendment has been made. Councillor Watt, do you have a question on it? No. All those in favor? Carried. And the bylaw be read a third and final time and be passed. And signed. We voted on the amendment, we don't have to vote on it again. Okay. So this is the amended motion, final vote on it. All those in favor? Carry. Sorry, it's the lack of air conditioning, I think, that's happening here. So we have were there any other items that I've missed, Councillor Drew?
4717.
Item 4717? Yeah. Councillor Drew?
4717, yeah, I just, in the bylaw, it states 2 members of council on the board of directors. Given that we're moving towards 1 councillor on every committee, I'm wondering if that's an oversight, or was that intentional? Or, I know that we made that motion, I don't know if it's 6 months for us to have to deal with it again, or what?
Has that question again, Mr. Clerk? My understanding would be brought back and addressed before the next term of council, right?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor, and through you to the council. There was no change proposed to the number of councillors on this on the BIA board at this point. This governance review focused on essentially the Municipal Act and bringing the bylaw in conformance with the Municipal Act. So there's no change proposed at this time for the composition of the BIA board.
And further, if I might, when you come down with the core services review on the committee structure, how will that look then?
You know? Yeah.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to the councillor, I don't know how that'll look yet. That report is still being worked on and still in progress, so it'll come forward in September, but I don't have a final decision on that yet.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, so those are all the items on the consent agenda. Now we're moving on to items extracted from the consent. Sorry, we need to vote on it, and also Councillor Kett, you had your hand up. I was really trying to... Councillor Kett.
I've lost all my information off of my computer here. 4717, is that where we just were?
So while we're waiting for you, Councillor Drew, you extracted that. Are you moving that, Councillor? And then we need a seconder for that, Councillor Watton. Councillor Kett.
Yes, I was looking at this and I was noticing there was 32 changes to the BIA bylaw, and 22 of them were according to the municipal act that they weren't being followed. And then I got to the bottom of this. No, I can't find it because it was supposed to be tabled on February the 13th.
I do not follow what you're saying, Councillor Kett.
I'm just looking at all the changes and wondering if it was tabled on February the 13th when it was supposed to, if we may have not ended up with all this integrity commissioner stuff on the 29th.
Councillor Kett, I'm giving you, don't go down an avenue, please, that you're trying to bring something up and relate it to this. This is the governance review, as far as I'm concerned, was a process that was initiated from this council. Mr. Clerk, did you when was the governance review that you were engaging in this process?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. This item has been on my work plan for this year. It is now essentially just at that stage where I've been able to bring it forward. Like all things in my work plan, they were prioritized, and this is where we're at with my work plan for this item. So it wasn't intended to come on February 13th. This is the time that I've had it ready, and it's presented today.
So, Councillor Kett, I'm not sure where you're going with this one, but I caution you where you're going with it, is that this is, as you can see, a large undertaking to bring this review forward, and as you know, everybody is working to at a red line level, so I would not want you in any way to make any implications on the timeliness of when this came out if something would or would not have happened. So I do think that's unfair to even suggest that. So, seeing no further comments on this, is we have a mover and a seconder, Councillor Drew, Councillor Watton. All those in favor? Carried. Next item is extracted as 11.1, 4617, bylaw to delegate certain authorities. This was moved by Councillor Guido, seconded by Councillor Drew. That the bylaw be read a first and second time, and that the 2017 summer delegation of authority bylaw be amended to include the delegation to the CAO to approve corporate policies and procedures, and that the bylaw number 46-17 be read a third and final time past the 26th day of June 17th, and the mayor and clerk are hereby directed to sign same affixed corporate seal. There too. Any questions on that? Seeing none, all those in favor? Carried. Okay. So the ward boundary review is, you need same mover seconder? Okay, mover for the ward boundary review bylaw, Councillor Somerville, seconded by Councillor Kett. That the bylaw 5417 read a first, second, and third time, finally passed the 26th day of June 2017. The mayor and clerk be hereby directed to sign same affix corporate seal thereto. Miss anything? Okay, and that the option 2 was selected, that Scugog Ward Boundary Option 2 presented by Watson Associates Economists be approved. All right, any questions, comments? All those in favor? Carried. Confirming bylaw, notice of motions, number 12, no, that's after 12 notice of motions, and 13 is new business general information. Councillor Drew?
Sorry, Mr. Mayor, but I regret that I have to call for a question of privilege. On June 19th, at a Planning and Community Affairs meeting, during the announcement portion of the meeting with a full gallery and press present, Councillor Kett called my integrity into question by stating that I had made a statement at the May 29th meeting which included, quote, bordering on criminal, or that he felt that my statement was bordering on criminal. Not sure which that was, but the May 29th council meeting included the deferred Integrity Commissioner's report and recommendations. I did not support the motion to not take any action on the report and read from a prepared statement. This statement I had carefully worded and worked on for a number of days. I read directly from the script, and it included direct quotes from the Integrity Commissioner's report, including, quote, malicious, intimidating, threatening, and coercing, unquote, and the quote, bordering on accusations of criminal activity, unquote. I had indicated they were quotes. My script had been reviewed by our legal counsel, who indicated my statement was fine. I can understand that quoting comments from the Integrity Commissioner's report would make Councillor Kett uncomfortable, but the entire report and the follow-up report and recommendations were very public. Councillor Kett, in my opinion, is in contravention of our Code of Conduct. The purpose section of the Code of Conduct states, quote, the conduct of members of council is of the highest standard, and that there is a fairness and respect for the differences and a duty to work together for goodwill and common good, unquote. Under Section 10, which states, quote, members shall conduct themselves with decorum and in accordance with the Township Procedural Bylaw. Respect for delegations, fellow council members, and staff requires that all members show courtesy and not distract from the business of council, unquote. Also, I feel that Councillor Kett is in contravention of Section 11, which states in part, quote, that all persons be treated with dignity and respect in the workplace in an environment free of discrimination and of personal and/or sexual harassment, unquote. This is the third time this term of council that I've had to call a question of privilege on Councillor Kett. It is also the third time in my long political career that I have done this or seen it done. It certainly is a black mark on our council and the way our business is conducted, and also unfortunate that just a matter of hours before Councillor Kett's statement, we had a session on harassment and bullying in the workplace, and were instructed that harassment and bullying is a criminal offense. Mayor Rowett, I wait your ruling.
Okay, so let me just start by saying that going forward, I do not want questions or privileges outside of the meeting that they are to be brought up at the time of the meeting. I understand there may have been some past precedents that has created this understanding, but I'm just letting everybody know that going forward, I do not want to deal with questions or privileges outside the current meeting because it is too hard to rule on it, especially when the particular meeting that is recorded has not been uploaded, so I can't even go back to that specific meeting. I did receive this printout here from Councillor Drew right before our meeting. I had a chance to just briefly read over it. I do want this council to work together. I do want clarification from Councillor Kett. I have a hard time trying to deal with a council that is constantly couple members that are going back and forth on particular items. I do believe that we are elected officials. We are subject to the public scrutiny. Having said that, I also firmly stand behind Code of Conduct and the integrity of our council. I only can recollect what Councillor Drew, or Councillor Kett had began to say, and I stopped him from saying it because I did not feel it was appropriate time. I have to also recognize that, Councillor Drew, if you were offended from that, I recognize those are your feelings, and we'll deal with it at this time. I do want to seek clarification of, without a debate or argument, I want to know from Councillor Kett what his intent behind that, and give you the opportunity to clarify that and clarify your intention behind that, and I'll decide if you need to follow up with an apology on that.
Thank you, Mayor. I was disturbed with the comments that Councillor Drew made in council, and I was not here. What my problem is that Councillor Drew makes these accusations as quotes, but does not read the full quote. So it can be very misleading. So my point was that if she's going to read a quote and say quote, that she reads the whole quote in whole, not in part. So criminal means a lot to people, but totally not criminal is a good thing, whereas criminal may not be. So if you're not going to read the whole thing in whole, then don't say anything at all. So that's my whole point, is when we're going to quote, let's quote the whole thing instead of just saying somebody is criminal when the quote was something else.
Okay, procedurally, Councillor Drew, I just want to give you the same opportunity to follow up with what Councillor Kett's giving clarity on where he was coming from.
Well, I could have quoted the whole Integrity Commissioner report. It was all the same flavor, but I didn't see any benefit in doing that.
Okay, so here's where I'm coming down to this, because I want this to end, and I want this to end now before we go into a summer session. So I'm going to rule that both of you have to understand that you may not feel that you're offending the other councillor, but you have to take ownership for what you're saying. If Councillor Drew feels offended by the way you brought it up and it seemed to be malicious or however she felt, it's how she felt, so you have to take ownership of saying that wasn't your intent, but you would apologize. Same with Councillor Drew. I would also want you to take ownership of the way Councillor Kett feels, that if he feels that you took snippets of quotes and it could be misleading, then I would want you both to apologize to each other for that, and that you're going to move forward with this, and if you guys don't, then I will take it upon myself to rule that until both of you apologize to each other, that neither one of you will be able to attend the council meetings going forward. And I leave it up to you guys, because I think it's unfair to the rest of council to have to deal with this, and I want professionalism and maintaining of integrity going forward, and recognizing that you may not feel that either one of you feel like you're doing anything wrong, but in the eyes of the public, in the eyes of me, I feel that you have to give respect for the other person the way they feel that it's being interpreted. So now is your opportunity. Councillor Kett?
Well, since I've explained exactly what I was going to say, I'll apologize if that offended Councillor Drew.
Do you accept that apology?
Yes, I'll accept the apology, and I hope that that's the end of it. I really don't want to go through this anymore. This is 3 times. I don't want to go through this anymore. I'm sorry that Councillor Kett took offense at the quotes that I made, and that were viewed by the legal counsel and approved.
Councillor Kett, do you accept that apology?
I didn't understand the last part.
That Councillor Drew was saying that, I'm not going to put too many words in there, that she vetted it with the legal counsel, so didn't feel that it was offside. But I'm clarifying it that if you took offense from it, that's a different story than a legal giving an opinion on it. So, Councillor Drew, you understand what I'm trying to...
I understand what you're saying.
So, Councillor Kett,
I was very offended.
Do you accept...
I will accept your apology this time.
So, and going forward, question of privilege I want to happen in the meeting so we can deal with it at that time and move forward, because just like everything else, the longer we let things fester, the worse it gets. So, I really hope that this is a beginning of the final sprint. We're just about at the summer recess. I want a reset button here. I want a reset button at BIA Chamber. I want a reset button everywhere. I think that we have some time to settle. I think this is a great opportunity to move forward in a positive effort. So now looking for a motion for confirming bylaw, moved by Councillor Drew, seconded by Councillor Watton. Read first, second, and third time. All those in favor? Carried. And before we go to an adjournment, Councillor Kett?
I wanted to pull
5217, it's too late to pull it. It's already been passed, so you can ask your question.
Yeah, my question is, we were assured through the report that it would be still going to Heritage. This that we just approved says it wouldn't be, but I'm assured that it would be going to Heritage Committee for
Just for
approval.
clarification, my understanding was there's still a Heritage input on this. I don't know if this is site plan agreements. Mr. Heritage, or?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to the councillor, the site plan agreement won't prevent staff forwarding the application to the Heritage Committee for a heritage permit. The applicant is required to seek a heritage permit from the Heritage Subcommittee because it's part of the heritage designation in the downtown.
Is that clarified then?
I believe so.
Okay, good.
Thank you.
So just before we adjourn for the summer recess, I'd like to wish everyone a very safe and dry summer. I know this, just because we don't have scheduled meetings doesn't mean we won't be dealing with business, and there may be, just a heads up, a special meeting around near the end of July, somewhere in that last week, that may be called to deal with some item which won't be a big deal, but other than that, on behalf of council, I'd like to wish everybody your birthday, so that won't be a major deal, I don't believe, but just wanted to wish everybody a safe and happy summer recess, and we need a mover. We have moved by Councillor Guido, seconded by, unless there's no seconder, we could not adjourn, Councillor Somerville. All those in favor for adjournment? Thank you. All right.